Your job is not going to disappear overnight, and most people are not expecting it to suddenly vanish anytime soon. But something much quieter is already starting to happen beneath the surface, and it's changing how work actually functions. Right now, you still complete your tasks manually, step by step, believing that everything depends entirely on you. But those tasks are slowly being broken down into smaller pieces that can be handled automatically by systems. And once that process begins, parts of your work start to shift without you fully realizing what is happening. Some things become faster, easier, and more efficient, almost without effort from your side. But at the same time, something deeper starts to change underneath all of that without being obvious. Because your job is not just evolving over time, it is being redefined in a way you haven't noticed yet. Right now, most jobs still follow a simple pattern that feels familiar and completely normal to you every day. You are given tasks, and you complete them step by step using your tools, your knowledge, and your time. You search for information, write, organize, respond, and make decisions throughout the day without thinking much about it. And everything depends on your ability to process that work manually from start to finish on your own. No matter the industry, the structure is often the same, even if the details look slightly different. You are the one doing the thinking, the execution, and the coordination behind each task you complete. And because this system has worked for so long, it feels stable and unlikely to change anytime soon. But this way of working is exactly what is starting to shift, even if it doesn't feel obvious yet. The change does not start with your entire job disappearing. It begins in much smaller and less obvious ways over time. At first, it feels like simple assistance, small features that help you move a little faster through your daily work. You notice suggestions appearing, tasks being completed more efficiently, and processes becoming smoother than before. And it all seems helpful, almost like an upgrade that makes your day slightly easier and more comfortable. But underneath that convenience, something more important is starting to happen without being immediately visible. Parts of your work are no longer fully dependent on you to be completed correctly from start to finish. And the more those parts grow and expand, the less of the process remains entirely in your control. Because this shift is not sudden or dramatic, it happens gradually, right in front of you without you noticing. Right now, you are probably hearing about artificial intelligence everywhere, especially when it comes to work and the future. Every company, platform, and creator is suddenly talking about AI as if it is the most important thing happening right now. But at the same time, very few people are actually explaining what any of this really means for your daily job. Instead, what you see are bold headlines, impressive demos, and powerful promises that sound important but feel unclear. And for most people, this creates more confusion than understanding about what is actually changing. You start to wonder if your work is at risk, even if nothing has really changed for you yet. But the real shift is not in the headlines or the hype. It is happening quietly in the background. And if you don't understand it now, you might not notice it until it has already changed how you work. This is where the change starts to become more noticeable, even if it still feels subtle and gradual at first. Tasks that once took time, effort, and focus are now being completed much faster, sometimes almost instantly. At first, it feels like a clear benefit, something that makes your work easier, smoother, and more efficient. But then you begin to realize that some of those tasks no longer require the same level of input from you. And that is where the real shift begins to take shape in a way that becomes harder to ignore over time. Because if parts of your job can be done without you, those parts slowly start to lose their importance. Not all at once, and not in a dramatic or obvious way, but gradually and quietly as time goes on. And that is how change begins to move from something helpful into something that feels fundamentally different. And this is where the situation becomes a little more uncomfortable, even if nothing seems obviously wrong at first glance in your daily work. Because the real risk is not that your entire job suddenly disappears overnight without any warning. The risk is that small parts of your work begin to lose value one by one, slowly and almost invisibly over time. Tasks that once required your attention, skill, and effort gradually become automated, assisted, or simplified by new systems. And as those tasks disappear or change, the role you play within that process begins to shift without you fully noticing it. At first, it might feel like nothing significant has changed because everything still looks familiar on the surface. But underneath that surface, the structure of your work is already being reshaped in subtle but important ways. And if your job depends heavily on those tasks, that is where the real risk begins to quietly appear over time. And the most important thing to understand is that this is not happening to just one specific type of job or industry. It is happening across different roles, different environments, and completely different ways of working every day. From office workers and freelancers to service jobs and creative roles, the same pattern is starting to appear. Small parts of work are being assisted, automated, or transformed by new systems over time. And even if the impact looks different on the surface depending on the job, the direction is the same underneath. Some people will notice it earlier and adapt quickly, while others may not realize it until much later. But the change does not stay isolated in one place. It spreads and expands across everything around us. Because this is not a local shift, it is something happening everywhere at the same time right now. But this change is not only about risk or loss, and it does not mean that work simply disappears from one moment to the next. In many cases, it actually makes things faster, smoother, and much easier to handle in your daily workflow. Tasks that once required a lot of time, effort, and attention can now be completed more efficiently with the right tools. And that allows you to focus more on decisions, creativity, and higher-level thinking that actually adds value. Instead of doing everything manually, you begin to work alongside systems that support you and enhance what you do. And for many people, this can open new possibilities and opportunities that did not exist before. The key difference is not whether work exists or not, but how your role within it begins to shift over time. Because in the end, this is not about losing work. It is about transforming how it gets done in a completely new way. What you are seeing right now is not the final version of this change. It is only the very beginning of something much larger. Everything we have talked about so far represents just an early stage of how work is starting to evolve. Because these systems are still improving, and they are advancing much faster than most people expect. What feels advanced today will quickly become normal, and then eventually outdated as new capabilities appear. The way you work will continue to adapt, becoming more efficient, more assisted, and more connected over time. And what seems like a small shift now can grow into something much more significant in a very short period. This is how change spreads, not suddenly, but by accelerating faster than people anticipate. And by the time it becomes obvious to everyone, it has already reshaped how work is done.
Looking back, I realized that the quiet moments were the most crucial for understanding.
But the truth is, this change has already started, quietly reshaping the way you work every single day. What once felt stable and predictable is slowly becoming more fluid, more dynamic, and less dependent on manual effort. And over time, that shift will become impossible to ignore as it changes how tasks are done across every industry. Your job will not simply disappear, but it will no longer look the same as it does today. And the people who understand this early will be the ones who adapt and move forward the fastest.
At first, it just felt like small changes, but now it's different. The way I work is not the same anymore.
This is the moment where work stops being just something you do and becomes something you do differently.